name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the OSU Library. Today is Monday, December 7th, 2015, and I'm in Marlow, Oklahoma in Stevens County interviewing Terry Brown as part of our Cowboys in Every County Oral History Project. Mr. Brown, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'd like to begin by learning a little more about you. Could you tell me the year you were born and where you were born?
I was born in 1947 in Walters, Oklahoma, in a hospital there. They had one at that time, but Walters, Cotton County.
And tell me a little bit about your parents.
Well, my dad was an electrician, worked for REA, and had worked there over 20 years, and he had some heart problems, and they tried to move him to a desk job, and he didn't want to do that, so he was out interviewing. Actually went to Lindsay for an interview and came back through Marlow and stopped at the City Cafe and found out about the city electrician job was open, and he took it. And we moved here in 1961.
And tell me about your mother.
My mother grew up in Peatone, Oklahoma, and I doubt very seriously if anybody knows where that's at. It's west of Walters, about 20 miles. It's close to Granville, Oklahoma. Grew up on a farm, one of 6 children, and she did not work until he passed away in 1964. She started working and became the school superintendent secretary.
And how did your family make their way to Marlow?
Well, as soon as my sister graduated in 1961, we got in the car and pulled a trailer and drove over here so my dad could go to work for the city. And that's how we got here. Okay.
So I'll back up for a second. Growing up in Walters, tell me a little bit about the schools you attended.
Well, it's very interesting. Most kids my age, I was going to enter the 9th grade, would have been not too interested in moving. And I was. I'd been picked on. I was a little bitty guy, and I got picked on a lot, and I was ready to get out of there. But I did like Walters, and of course it's a home of Abe Lemons, so there's some deal there. And very interesting childhood, but a lot of our family was there, and so you didn't really have to go anywhere. I'd never been out of the state of Oklahoma until I was 16 years old, other than Texas. So I'd never left. So I finally got to see the world, but it was later.
And do you have siblings?
I've got an older sister that is a retired school teacher. She married a coach and a teacher here from Marlow, actually. They met at Central State. She went to Central State, and my brother went to Central State, and he became a coach and coached for 40 years, and they're all retired now. I'm the only one still working.
And were you always interested in playing sports when you were growing up?
Yeah, I was doing something with the ball all the time. My brother was smarter than me. He listened to my dad. He was a good electrician. He could work on automobiles. He could build things, and I couldn't do anything unless it had air in it. I couldn't do it. But I loved sports when I was young, and as far as having dreams of playing pro ball or going to college, that wasn't in my ideals. I mean, that wasn't even a thought of mine because I didn't ever dream that you could do that. I didn't know. And then my dad, we got here, and we weren't here 3 years. My dad passed away after surgery, and kind of left us. I had to work before and after school, and then I'd go practice football, and then so it was pretty tough. And the scholarship obviously helped me a lot.
What type of work did you do when you were in high school?
Actually, I worked for the Marlow Review. I poured hot pigs. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's the old lead that they poured into so the linotype machine could operate, and you'd type out the letters. We built ads and did a lot of job printing. So I really had a skill there if I wanted to continue. But I didn't.
Playing ball in Marlow, tell me a little bit about your coach at the time.
Well, Coach Sybil Pickett was a legend in Oklahoma, and he's in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, and ran the single wing, which OSU ran back in the 40s. And so it was an old offense, And I played single wing fullback. My senior year, I rushed for over 2,600 yards, and that's a lot. I mean, most people want to get 1,000, and he was a mastermind at motivation, and my whole 3 years in high school, we only lost 4 games, and they were to state champions in bigger classes. So he was a very successful coach.
And you also won a state championship here in '64?
Yes, in 1964, we beat Bigsby for the state championship.
Okay. And at that time, what were you thinking you wanted to do with your life?
You know, that's what's so strange about it, not having a father with guidance, and my mother didn't really help me much. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was getting scholarship offers, but I didn't know it. They were coming through the school, and the coach wouldn't give them to me. And I think he did that on purpose, and it's probably a good thing. Until after my senior year, that's when my recruiting started. And up until that time, I didn't even think about. I knew I wanted to go to college. I didn't think I'd get to play college football. I did have some interest in basketball. I was a senior to watch, which is kind of like a blue chip, and I had some offers there. But once I got through my senior year, he gave me all the letters, and it's probably a good thing he did it that way, because I concentrated on football, and so it worked out real well. And
how did you sort through all of your offers?
Well, back then it's a little different than it is today. The world has shrunk. And I knew I was only going to go one of 2 places. It was going to be in Oklahoma, and it was either going to be OU or OSU. And to be honest, in the 50s, I followed on the radio. We listened to some OU games because of the great teams they had back then. I didn't really know much about OSU. My mother went there 1 year, and she had to come home. And but as far as knowing anything about either school, I didn't until I started the recruiting process. And I made my decision to go to OSU. I guess you might ask that question, but I made my decision to go to OSU because of the people, and I love the school, and I love the way I was treated. And not that they don't treat you that way at the other schools, but I just felt comfortable. This was home, and that's where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. And the recruiting process was happening during your high school years?
Yes, and during basketball season, I went on several weekend trips, and the one that sealed it for me, and you won't know this because you weren't born probably, but in 1965, OSU won the Big 8 championship in basketball, and I got to see the Kansas game the night OSU beat them in 4 overtimes. It was a great game and exciting, and of course Gallagher-Iba was blowing through the roof, and I said, this is where I want to go right now. So that probably was the major decision factor in my deciding to go to OSU, is being a part of that crowd.
Mm-hmm. And during your visits, did you meet Coach Cudgens?
Yes. I was recruited by Tommy Ellis. He was a tight ends coach or something like that. And then you met the head coaches, and you met all the assistants and during the recruiting weekends.
Mm-hmm. And what impression did you get of him?
Well, actually, I had a pretty good impression over Gomer Jones at OU, and he, when it came down to head coach, I picked Phil Cutchin. I knew he'd come from Alabama. I knew that he had a good pedigree, but other than that, I think the people that showed me around probably convinced me that Walt Garrison had a lot to do with it. I'll tell you that right now. Walt was a great guy, and meeting him, and we're still friends today.
Mm-hmm. So you finish up your senior year, you graduate from Marlow High. How do you get from Marlow to Stillwater?
I had to take a ride with a friend. There was a recruit in Duncan named Terry Watley. I didn't have a car. I didn't have really no money. There was nothing in the bank for me. I didn't have a bank account. And I went up there, rode with them. I had one bag and a couple hanging clothes, jeans and shirts, and that was it. And it was that way. I didn't buy a car till my sophomore year in college, and I was able to buy a car because the government gave me some money because my dad died while I was in college. It wasn't very much, $60 a month. And it's $90 a month. My payment on the car was $57 a month. And it wasn't a very fancy car, but it was about $2,000 back then. But I kept that car till I graduated, until I got my bonus, and then I bought another car.
And did you work while you were in Stillwater?
No, on scholarship, that is a job.
Mm-hmm.
We figured it up one time. We was making about 35 cents an hour, I think, but you couldn't work. I did go home spring break. I went home Christmas break, and I went home summer, and I worked. I worked for Halliburton Oil Company during one summer, and I worked for an oil man the next summer. But I had to work to survive, to be able to go to school, because I bought everything I got. Nobody else, my mother couldn't help me at all. Mm-hmm. I knew how bad it was when my sister came home from college one time, and she gave her a $10 bill, and she hadn't been home in 2 months. So I knew she wouldn't. She worked, and my brother worked. We had to work. Mm-hmm. But my work was the scholarship, but thank goodness I got that.
So take me through a typical day at OSU in terms of being a student athlete.
Well, of course, we had to get up and go to breakfast. That was one of our requirements. You couldn't skip breakfast. You had to sign in every morning, and then you had to go to class. And back then, they gave you a deal for the teacher to sign that you were in class. So I usually took 15 to 16 hours a semester, just like most average students do. And by mid-afternoon, we were working out every day and all year long. Very little time off, and you were doing something all the time. I think they demand more of them now, like in the summers and stuff like that they didn't make us do.
Mm-hmm. And where did you live while you were on campus?
I lived in an athletic dorm. They had athletic dorms back then. I don't think they do that now, but we lived in West Bennett my freshman year, and then we moved to the brand new athletic dorm, which was the Iba Hall, and I think it's changed to a graduate assistant or something. I'm graduate students. I don't know what it is now. But that was a brand new athletic dorm, really nice for us at the time.
Hmm. And your major was?
Well, I started out in pre-med actually, and I realized real quick that I wasn't good enough to do that. So I changed to education, and with an emphasis in biology. Then when I came back to finish my degree, I started taking business courses. So I really switched. I really didn't know what I wanted. I had no idea. I thought I wanted to be a football coach, and I realized early that wasn't what I wanted. Probably the main factor there was 1959, they fired the entire staff at Kentucky because they were not very smart. They were not good coaches. The head coach was Blanton Collier, who is an NFL Hall of Fame coach. His assistants were Irmo Allen, who's one of the offensive geniuses, was the offensive coordinator for Dallas Cowboys for 20 years. John North was the head coach. There was a guy from the Los Angeles Rams head coach and 3 professional scouts, and they were fired because they were incompetent. I said, I don't know that I want this. And of course, they didn't get paid like they get paid today, so. But I'm not a coach. Everybody thinks you are, but I'm not. I can help young people maybe with basics, but as far as being a coach, my brother and brother-in-law's 1,000 times better than I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you start out playing right away on the varsity squad, or did they have the JV back then?
Well, I don't know that they called it JV, but the freshmen played their own schedule, and we did not play with the varsity. And in my sophomore year, I got a starting job, and I started ever since. So I was lucky.
Okay. And your first year on campus, that's the year where we the big Bedlam victory.
Yeah, that was a big win for OSU, and I started to realize then the difference between the schools, because I mean, I had no idea growing up. Nobody had ever taken, I didn't go to a college football game.
Mm-hmm.
First one I went to, I played in, so, I mean, it was kind of different, but it was very interesting that, freshmen didn't get to play, and we played the University of Arkansas and Cameron Junior College when they was winning the national championship, so we played some pretty good teams.
And when you started for OSU your sophomore year, what was your position?
Well, I played corner, and it was funny, I was a big corner, 6'1", 210, and I was voted one of the top newcomers of the year on defense, and I really thought that was where my career was headed, and I thought really had a shot at being an All-American, and then my junior year, Coach Cutchin called me in and he asked me, but I think he was telling me that he was going to move me to offense to get me the ball, and I thought, well, that's great, I get to run the ball. Well, they moved me to blocking back, in which I caught a lot of passes, and I set a Big 8 record and OSU record that held up till Hartley Dykes got there, but we didn't throw the ball like they do today. I could have caught 1,000 passes if they had thrown it like that. But then what's funny is at the end of my career, I got drafted as a defensive back, as a safety. So I think the pros knew what position I should have been in.
Mm-hmm. Any memorable games that really stand out for you during your time?
Well, I think probably the Colorado game my junior year, they were number 3 in the nation. We upset them 10-7. I think that was one of the biggest games. We played so well that day, and we had some very good talent on this team, and we should have won a lot more games than we did. And I don't have the answer except chemistry, but that one, and then my senior year I had 2 games where I caught 10 passes, and that was a lot back then. That was a big deal for me against Kansas and Missouri. And I became friends with Roger Worley later, and he was a defensive back. He got the game ball our senior year, but I caught 10 passes, and if he hadn't intercepted 3, I'd have had 3 touchdowns. So it was interesting. Those were probably the biggest games.
You mentioned Walt Garrison a little while ago. Any teammates that just really stand out in your mind?
My teammates?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. John Cole played for the Steelers 15 years, 4 Super Bowls. We made fun of him when he got drafted because he got drafted by Pittsburgh and they was 1-15. Well, he got the last laugh because he got 4 Super Bowl rings. And I didn't win any Super Bowls. I got played 2, but I didn't win any. John was there, Jerry Shirk, John Ward, John Little. We had some guys that played pro ball for a long time that were really good. And Bob Cutbirth. There was Larry Gosney played on that team, and he got to the final cut for Green Bay. So a lot of talent, just didn't have success.
And as you're progressing through college, did you have any idea of what you wanted to do, or did you know you had a good chance of being drafted?
Well, I didn't. It's funny, I started getting letters from pro teams my sophomore year, which you can't play till you're senior. And I started realizing that I might have a chance to go to pro ball. And of course it got bigger and bigger my senior year, and I got to play in a couple of all-star games that really helped me, but I knew that I was going to get a shot. Whether I made it or not, it's going to be another story, but I knew I was going to get a shot. And of course, a lot of teams like the Dallas Cowboys make you think you're going to be the #1 draft choice. But everybody I talked to thought the same thing. So I didn't realize I'd be drafted by St. Louis. I had no clue. Mm-hmm. But you never know.
And did you graduate right on time?
No. At the end of 4 years, believe it or not, I lacked 3 hours. And here's how I got to the finish line. Because that off season, I had to join the Army Reserve so I could play pro football. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I was going to the Army and go to Vietnam. And so I got in a unit, and that off season I had to go to active duty, which I did. And I came back, the next fall was football. Well, then the next spring, 71, I got to graduate. I finished and graduated.
Okay.
So I stayed with it. That's when I started taking business courses. Instead of taking 3 hours, I took a bunch of business courses, and that's helped me.
So you were drafted in the 3rd round by St. Louis in 1969. And what was going through your mind when you learned you were drafted?
Well, I mean, I couldn't believe it, number one, that it was really going to happen. And I flew to St. Louis that weekend, and they gave me a $100 bill, and I thought, my goodness, this is going to be a good deal. But I'd never seen a $100 bill. But my first salary was $16,000. Not like today, it's changed. The number 1 draft choice got $18,000. So it's not like there was a big difference. The biggest difference was the bonus. And I got a $25,000 bonus. Immediately went and bought a car. It wasn't fancy, just a good car. That's the first thing I did, and it cost me $3,200. 1969.
What'd you buy?
It was a Pontiac Le Mans. I doubt if you've ever heard of it. They don't even make them anymore. But it was like they had a Pontiac GTO, which was the high dollar deal, and then the Le Mans is right below it.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite as fancy. I didn't want fancy. I just wanted a car that could go. I had one that was about to come to the end.
Did you enjoy your time in St. Louis?
Yeah, I really did. Roger Worley and I became very good friends, and still are today. And I like St. Louis. I like Minnesota better though. Mm-hmm. I didn't stay up there in the off season. I bought a house in St. Louis, but I didn't stay in Minnesota. That 30 below and 40 below in the winter didn't feel very good to me. Were
you traded to Minnesota?
Not really. It's a long story. Back then, I had in 1971, I had beat out the safety, and I was starting, and he was all pro, and I dislocated my hip, so I had to sit out the whole year. Well, I came back in 72 and beat him out again and broke my jaw in 2 places in a preseason game. Well, they put me on what they call injured reserve, and there's only one way to get off injured reserve, and that's to go through waivers. And they told me they wouldn't take that chance. And then all of a sudden they did. And Minnesota picked me up just like that. They had just had a safety that was involved in a bad motorcycle accident. And I went to Minnesota, and on that deal, I was told I would not be put on waivers, and they did. So, but I went to Minnesota's best break, literally, that I've ever had, because I loved it up there, and I loved the teammates I had, and we went to 2 Super Bowls, so I got to experience that.
Well, you have the distinction of being the only native Oklahoman.
Actually, that changed.
It did? It changed was it recently?
I was the first native. I used to say I was the only native Oklahoman to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl, but when Shockley from Ada did it, then I became the first.
Well, there we go.
But they can't take that away from me. They can take the other part of it.
Well, tell me about that.
Well, it was being in the right place at the right time. We played, all of us in Minnesota, we played on all the special teams and everything, and I was on the punt block team, and we went in, and Matt Blair blocked the punt down deep in there, on the field, and the ball took a bounce and bounced right in my hands as I stepped across the goal line. So it wasn't a 70-yard interception. I told everybody in Marlow that, but that's not true. It was a 1-yard ball, and it fell right into my arms. Just the luck of the draw.
You had one more stop after Minnesota.
I got traded to Cleveland in 1976, and part of that was my problem, because I had made some requests to the head coach, and biggest mistake I ever made. I wished I could have it over, but I can't. Mm-hmm. I didn't like Cleveland very much, and I retired. After that year, I said, I'm through, this is it. And we had kids in school, and it was time we moved back to Stillwater at that time.
So I'm going to back up a second and ask you how you met your wife.
Okay. Well, actually, I met her at the swimming pool at Marlow, Oklahoma. We were high school sweethearts, and we dated 5 or 6 years before we got married. So I met her right here in Marlow and married her, and we've been married 47 years. So I guess don't like change.
So after your time in Cleveland, you retired and you moved back to Oklahoma. So why? You can move anywhere. You could go anywhere, and you returned to Oklahoma.
Okay, you're in the Marlow, Oklahoma right now, and it's 5,000 people. And on a really bad day, I mean really bad day, when the traffic is at its height, it takes me 2 minutes to get home. I make a good salary, but money is not the reason I live, because I could have stayed in the cities and done very well in almost anything. I had a lot of opportunities, but that's not what I like. Small towns. I like the people. I'm 2 hours from Stillwater. I'm 2.5, 3 hours from Dallas. I'm an hour from Oklahoma City. I don't know why you'd want to live in that mess. I can go do anything they do in any time. I do not like traffic. I still don't like traffic. I really was intending to come to Stillwater. I don't know if you remember Dupree Sports, but Gordon was going to sell me the sporting goods store, and I really wanted to buy it, and something happened, and he decided not to sell it, so that's when I moved to Marlow. Had a chance to buy the Marlow Review that I worked for, and that fell through. And then this opportunity, what I've been doing for the last 37 years, fell into my lap, and it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. And that's, went to work for State Farm Insurance as an agent, and I've been here ever since.
Did you know much about the insurance business?
Nothing. In fact, I was one of those guys in college that said, I'll never sell insurance. Those guys would come in your dorm, and try to sell you stuff. I said, I'll never do that. But it's a lot different than that. I mean, I sell all lines, so it's not quite just, I gotta sell that life policy, I gotta sell that life policy. But all you do is show people their needs. They buy them or don't buy them. It's up to them. And so if they've got a need, they know they gotta buy something. So I've enjoyed the insurance industry. It's given me an opportunity to be able to go watch my kids play sports and do things and musicals and speech departments, whatever it is. So I got to do all that without really having any trouble, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, I'm guessing a lot of the insurance business is about building relationships within communities,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
you moved home. I can't think of a better way to.
Well, and when I got here, to be honest, there was some of them wanted to make sure I stayed before they changed, but they finally did. And I've had some great customers over the years. So, and I've got customers all over the state. If you know the right people and they're willing to do business with you, it'll work. But of course, I'm at the end of my career. I'm not going to keep doing this. I don't know why I hadn't retired. I mean, it's fun, and I still enjoy it, and I still do coffee shop 2 or 3 times a day, so I'm not working that hard anymore. A lot of people say I don't do anything, but that's all right.
Tell me a little bit about your kids.
Well, my oldest daughter, Kristen, went to OSU. She was a valedictorian of her class, and they didn't give scholarships to valedictorians back then, so I paid for that for 4 years. Suzanne, my middle daughter, now Kristen lives here in town. Her husband's a pilot for American Airlines. He's an OSU graduate, was a flying Aggie, did the whole thing, and actually flew the teams around a little bit, the basketball coaches and some of those, before he left there. Suzanne she's my oddball. She went to Baylor and graduated in business administration. She told me that, Dad, if I go to Baylor, I can get any job I want, and I'll be fine. Well, she couldn't find a job, and she finally went to work at OSU for Jerry Gill in the alumni deal. Found a husband who was an OSU engineer graduate, and they live in OOHRP now. So I told her she had to go to OSU to find a man. My son, Greg, lives in Edmond, and he is a graduate of OSU. He played football. He and I are one of the only father-son team partners that beat OU twice in our career. So we've got a little bragging rights there too.
And you're still very involved in the Marlow community. You've called football for years.
I retired that. I called games for 35 years, play-by-play. And I've been president of Chamber, president of Lions Club, president of the foundation. I've done it all here, and I've been doing the parades here. I set up the parades, and we've been doing that over 40 years. So they're about to get rid of me. If they could find an excuse, they would.
And I guess a little over a year ago, you have a little stretch of street here in Marlow.
Yeah, it took 50 years, but they named the street after me, and it's only 2 blocks. It's right by the football field. Nobody had to change their address, and I've already had complaints. You know, they want me to fill the chug hose. I said, if you'll let me charge a toll, I'll start doing that.
Well, you know, looking back on your career at OSU, how did attending the university impact your life?
Well, I think most people would say the same thing. The people that I met and the people I've come across, some of the greatest people in the world. Not just while I was there, it's people prior to me and people after me. I've gotten to know some of these, the people that set the stage for the rest of us, the Bob Fenimores, the Neil Armstrongs, the Yojo Yutakis, and those guys, those types of guys that became friends of mine. And I think that's what's you're talking about, relationships that last forever. That's the key, and that's the reason I picked OSU. And no offense to OU, but when I went to OU, I didn't fit. I didn't feel like that. You know, they asked me what my dad did and what fraternity I was going to join. I didn't. My dad wasn't alive, and I didn't even know what a fraternity was at the time. So it just didn't fit me. And the people at OSU, even today, are still the greatest people I've ever been around. They really seem to care that that you're still alive, you know.
Mm-hmm. And in this neck of the woods here in Oklahoma, where we are here in Stevens County, is it more? I only ask because I noticed driving into town it says, you know, home of the outlaws, welcome to Marlow. And on the back side of that sign, I want to say it had some OU reference.
Well, that was the big OU alumni that tried to get me to go to OU. He owns that property. He's not alive anymore, but that's why that sign's there. I think there's a lot of OSU people in Stevens County. I really do. Now, OU still probably got the most, but there's a lot of OSU people here. I don't worry about that and don't think about it, but there's a lot more OSU people here than a lot of places. I will tell you a story. When we moved here, my daughter was in 2nd grade, and her first question to me when she came home from school that day is, Dad, why does everybody hate OSU? and it's, you know, it's just kids, but I tried to explain to her. Now she bleeds orange more than I do. I mean, she can't stand it. She don't like to lose to anybody.
Well, these days, how do you show your loyalty?
Well, of course, we were season ticket holders for forever, 30-something years, and I've to be honest, I've given that up, but it's because I can't stay awake. I don't want to drive. I'll give you a story. One time we was driving home, and I got chick-shay, and I told my wife, I said, I can't go any further. You're going to have to drive. She drove, and I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning in the parking lot at Walmart and Dunkin'. She went shopping, and I didn't even know it. So when you're that tired and sleepy, it's kind of but we still support OSU in a lot of ways, Stevens County and through the whole thing, and we're lifetime members of the Alumni Association, and we still pull for every one of them, everything they do.
Well, you've been here in Marlow a long time. Can you just talk a little bit about how the community has changed through the years?
You know, it's funny, when I moved here, there's 5,000 people, and there's still 5,000 people. It hadn't grown. We're kind of landlocked. Within 8 miles, every direction, there's a school. The little Bray Doyle community, Central High community, Rush Springs, and Duncan. So you're not going to grow as a school. The school is, we're 3A, and it's a good school system. And I think a lot of people come here for that reason. But as far as, it's a rural community. There's farmers, a lot of oil field people. A lot of people work for Halliburton. A lot of people are in that industry. So that's kind of, and a lot of people drive to Fort Sill to work, government workers. My mother drove over there for a little while until she got the Marlow job. But it's a bedroom community, and it's funny how it really hasn't grown. People die and new people come in. But,
How has downtown changed through the years?
well, we had 2 drugstores downtown when I was a kid. We had a roller rink and skating rink, and we had a movie theater, which we don't have anymore. We have a lot of, I call them mercantile shops, antiques, stuff like that. And we've actually got 2 restaurants that are as good as any place in the state of Oklahoma. I promise you. Giuseppe's, unbelievable. And it was Giuseppe's before Stillwater got theirs. And then they've got a new 213 barbecue that's really good. So we've got 3 banks, which is unusual for this small town, but we're only 10 miles from Duncan, so I mean it's kind of, our biggest industry is Wilco manufacturing, and they've gone from, because of the economy right now, because the oil played out, they've gone from almost 500 employees down to maybe 200. So that scares me a little bit, but we've been there before. When you live in an oil community, you're going to see it.
Absolutely. You know, we've noticed, we talk to a lot of alumni that most have this strong connection to OSU, this loyalty. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe it's a warm, fuzzy feeling that I have about OSU and the way people treat you. I think that is the biggest thing, and I think most people that come out of there want to give back. I think even when you talk fans in football, I'll guarantee you our loyal fans are going to always be there, no matter what happens. They go 0-10, they're still going to be there. You don't see that at other schools. They're either on the bandwagon or they're off the bandwagon. And I think that moves on into the next phase of your life when you're able to make some money or do something and you're able to give back to the community or back to the university that you went to. I think that's probably the reason.
So what's up next for you? Are you looking to retire?
I probably am going to retire next year and a half. Then I can go travel and do what I want to a little bit. And we've got 10 grandchildren, so we stay pretty busy watching basketball and soccer and all baseball and all the stuff that goes on. They keep us pretty busy.
Well, when people look back on Terry Brown, what would you like people to remember about you?
Well, I think I'd want them to, and this is true anywhere at any time, in Marlow or Stillwater, I don't care where it is, to say he's a man of integrity, that you can believe what he says, and that he's always there to help if you need him.
Anything else you'd like to add before we close on out?
Go Pokes!
I think that works. Thank you so much for joining us today.